Welcome back to another episode of Farming with Science. Today, we welcome back our extension specialist in small ruminant production, Dr. Catalina Cabrera, and she's going to talk to us about why we should invest time and resources evaluating the adoption of reproductive technologies such as synchronization of estrus and ovulation, and also artificial insemination. So our background for this topic is that, like we said in the previous program, if we don't have reproduction, we don't have production. So in order to maximize our resources, we have to evaluate our tools that we can use to maximize our efficiency. And estrus synchronization, artificial insemination, and other techniques can help us achieve better productive goals. So, Dr. Cabrera, good morning and welcome back, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me again, and I am happy to have this conversation with you all.
Let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about synchronization for the people that are not familiar with what synchronization means.
Yeah, so briefly, basically what we do when we talk about synchronization is we use some of the hormones that naturally the animal will be producing to cycle in a regular basis. And what we are going to do is we are going to use these hormones, but like pharmacologically, and apply them or inject them, depending on what hormone we are referring to these animals to kind of like mimic what they will be doing naturally. And so what we are going to do is we are just going to put a group of animals together, use some of these hormones and recreate their cycle so that they all get grouped and cycle on the time that we are interested on them to be cycling.
Dr. Cabrera, and you are talking now about the manipulation of the reproductive cycle, and I want that the farmer or producer that are hearing us right now can understand or know what are the advantage of the synchronization in these small ruminants.
So there are several advantages. In particular, in the case of small ruminants, different than with cows, one of the advantages is that we can help through the use of these hormones to bring these animals to a breeding season a little bit faster. So we know that these animals start cycling as the days start getting shorter, and they will, depending on the breed, start cycling. Big group of these animals will be cycling around September. So with the use of some of these synchronization hormones, we can bring some of these animals to cyclicity at the beginning of that breeding season. That's one of the advantages. Another advantage is that we can group animals so that they all cycle together. So if we want to have a lambing or a kidding season that is short, then we can synchronize our animals so that they all cycle together and that they are all breed together. So that will help us to have an homogeneous crop of animals. It also facilitates that we put our resources together in just specific moments of time. So we don't have to be worried about if we are using somebody else's ram or back, and we are going to have that animal for a long period of time. If we synchronize our animals, then we just shorten the period of time that we are going to need that animal. If we are using artificial insemination, then we can focus our time to artificial insemination to a short period of time instead of having to be looking for every time that an animal comes in heat. Those are some of the advantages.
Dr. Cabrera, just for the people that are hearing us, we all always synchronize the estrus for our small ruminant for use artificial insemination, or there is other reason for synchronize the estrus?
No, we don't have to synchronize and inseminate. We can do one or the other or the combination of both. So we can use synchronization only for bringing animals to a breeding season, for example. We can use synchronization just to group the animals and put our own bag, our own ram with them, but still we know that that animal is going to breed all these females in a short period of time. Or even if you are using your neighbor's bag or ram, you can also synchronize the animals so that when you bring the animal, all the females are coming into heat in a short period of time. So we don't have to use it only for artificial insemination.
So looking at the, again, definitions, we talk about estrus synchronization. Is it the same thing as ovulation synchronization? Is it the same? Is it different? Can you explain?
Um, yes, there is a difference, and it's an important difference. So when we talk about synchronizing the estrus or synchronizing heat, we are trying to get all the animals to come into heat in a relatively close period of time. So that might range from like 2 to 3 days. So if I'm synchronizing a group, for instance, of 10 animals, then they're going to start coming into heat, let's say on Monday, then some will come on heat on Tuesday, Wednesday. So we synchronize those heats into a short period of time. When we talk about synchronization of the ovulation, we add another hormone to make sure that all the animals ovulate. So that egg that is going to be fertilized is released relatively at a short period of time. So when we synchronize the ovulation, we are looking, and it's more commonly used for insemination, because at that point you are trying to get all your animals for that morning that you are going to be doing the inseminations, for example. So then you want to synchronize the ovulation to make sure that you are not having to heat detect, for example. So that will be what we call a timed artificial insemination. It will be I go and inseminate all my animals without having to heat detect because I know that I induce the ovulation.
If I am a producer, Dr. Cabrera, when I should use an estrus synchronization or the ovulation synchronization?
Most of the times we would say that for sure if you're planning on an artificial insemination time, if you are having a person that is coming to inseminate the animals for you, for example, then in those particular cases you want to for sure synchronize the ovulation. If you are just synchronizing a group of animals to make sure that they all cycle within a week, then you don't need to induce ovulation, you just induce the heat. That will be the most important difference would be that. If you're just going to put animals in, like males with your animals, then you won't synchronize the ovulation necessarily.
For the average novice person that retires and buys a bunch of goats and hasn't taken an animal science class in their life, can you go back and define what heat detection is, what heat is, so they have an idea?
Yes. So heat is basically the manifestation that that animal is ready to be bred and that is going to be fertile for the most part, and is going to be receptive to the male. That's what the heat is. So there are some manifestations from the animal. They change a little bit between goats and sheep, but in both cases there will be an interest for the male. So if there is a male around, they will approach it. A lot of times they will, like the goats, will flag their tail. Um, there is not so much of a behavior of mounting between female and female as there is in cows, but there is some of these. Some animals will urinate a little bit more frequently. Those are kind of like the main. There are other signs that are less behavioral, but are like something that you can see. Sometimes their vulva is going to start getting a little bit more red and a little bit of swelling. Sometimes you will see mucus that is going to be coming from the vulva. So those are also some signs of the animal being in heat. And heat detection is basically our ability using tools or just what we are seeing to identify the right moment where those animals is in heat to make sure that those animals get access to semen, whether you're using a male or frozen semen.
And then how can we help those animals get bred? How can we detect the heat? What aids do we use?
Some of the aids, there are several ways to do it, but some of the aids that are most commonly used in the case of sheep we use a vasectomized ram. So basically, this is a ram where we have removed a part of the duct where the semen is going to transit through. And so these animals are going to be able to mount, but they are not going to be able to get the animal pregnant. So we can have some of these males in our farm, and then when we see that this male is mounting and the female is receptive to that mount, we know that that female is in heat. You can add to those males a sheen ball, so basically some colors. So if you are not seeing the animal when the animal is mounting, you just will see your females with that color in their back, so you know that they were mounted. Sorry. In the case of goats, they display a more obvious heat. So one of the things that we do is you can walk a male around and see how they present to that male, how they react to the presence of that male. Or even you can use a rag that has been rubbed in a male and that you can keep in a Ziploc bag, and then you can expose that female to smell that rag. And once she smells the male pheromones, she's going to react to it, moving her tail, urinating, and showing a lot of interest for it. So those are some of the ways to do heat detection. In the case of the goats, we also do a vaginal exam. So during those days that we are expecting that they are coming into heat, we do a vaginal exam just to make sure that their cervix their cervix of the uterus is opening and that the mucus is also going together with that manifestation of heat.
Okay, so let's talk about the protocols and hormones that we use. I want you to be general because there's a lot of information in this category, and for the sake of time, I want you to summarize what protocols and hormones we're using and why we're using them.
The hormones that we use are very limited. There are not a lot of hormones that we use. What changes a little bit is the protocol in terms of the times that you have between hormones. But basically, in most of the cases, we will use intravaginal device that is going to release progesterone. These are called seeders. They are using cows as well. There is a version for small ruminants. It's labeled for its use in sheep, and it can be used extra label in goats. We will use that. Another hormone that is relatively common to use in these protocols is prostaglandin. So the prostaglandin will remove any influence of progesterone that the animal has from her own ovaries. And sometimes we use another hormone that is the one that is going to induce the ovulation. So basically we are talking about the use of 3 hormones. Just we will change a little bit the time in between or the time that we will leave the vaginal device inside, depending on every specific circumstance.
All right, so we talk about heat detection in our goats and sheep, and now I want that you tell to the people what is artificial insemination and what is the purpose of use artificial insemination.
So artificial insemination is basically the use of semen that has been collected from animals off-site most of the times. Most of the times it will come frozen, but there is also an option to bring it refrigerated or chilled. And so in that case, we, producer or technicians or veterinarians will be the ones that will be depositing that semen inside the animal. So there is no contact with the male. And that's what is called artificial insemination. So that's what the artificial insemination means. The advantages are multiple. That will favor and help us to improve genetics in our herd because we could have access to genetics from a male that is off-site, either in the state or in a different state, even overseas. So we could bring to our herd high genetic material. It allows us to crossbreed, so I could be breeding some females with some breed and other females with other breed, if that's what my production system is interested in. It also decreases the transmission of venereal diseases because these animals are not being mounting several females. Usually these animals are just being collected to to provide the semen, so then we reduce some of the risks associated with venereal diseases. It has economical advantages because we can group our resources, we can group our animals so that they get bred earlier in the season. Maybe that's an advantage to have lambs or kids early in our season. And you can breed several animals at the same time. Those are some of the advantages of artificial insemination, but there are several.
So now I want that you explain us what are the different types of artificial insemination methods and which one will be the best one for small producers.
For the case of goats, we have two methods. So the goats can be inseminated through the vagina like they do with cows relatively easily. It's a technique that the producers can learn. It just takes some practice, so it might not have very good results at the beginning, but once the producer gets hands-on on it, they will learn to detect the heat in the right moment and do the technique very accurately and have good results. So this is an option that all goats producers have. Basically, we will introduce an speculum in the vagina. We will have access to see the opening to the uterus, and then through that opening, we will introduce the artificial insemination gun and deposit the semen in the cervix or ideally inside the uterus. So that's one option. The other option that we have in goats is what is called laparoscopic insemination, and in that case, it's a small surgical procedure that requires much more equipment and technique. So usually you will use a veterinarian or a technician that is trained for this. And in this procedure, what you do is you do two small incisions in the abdomen of the animal. You will introduce a camera, and through this camera, you will visualize the uterus, and you will introduce the insemination gun. And in this situation, you will do an injection inside the uterus to deposit the semen. In the case of sheep, we don't have the possibility of doing the vaginal cervical insemination because their cervix, the opening to the uterus, is very convoluted. So we don't have good results with this technique. So in the case of sheep, the recommendation will be to do the laparoscopic insemination. That is the one that will require the technician, the sedation, and the equipment.
So let's summarize everything that we have talked about. It's a lot of information. So I want you to invest a little time on the key points that we want the producer to get out of this video. What are those things that they can start working on now, adopting now?
If you are considering that you're going to start a synchronization and or an artificial insemination program in your farm, very important is to have access to a good hair health in your hair. So you want to make sure that all your females are in good condition, in good body condition score, that they are healthy. In the case of the male, if you're going to use somebody's male or your own male, that male is going to be tested just to make sure that the animal has good semen and that your females are going to get pregnant. And if you're going to use somebody else's semen, if you're bringing semen from somebody else to your farm, usually they will certify it and they will have a look at the semen and make sure that the semen is good. So key components is you want to have a good quality of semen. You want to do a good heat detection if you're not doing a synchronization of the ovulation. And then you have to have an adequate insemination technique just to make sure that everything works.
In conclusion, we want you guys to start thinking about all those things that you can do on your farm to be more profitable. Remember that if there's no reproduction, there is no production. So we have to take advantage of every tool that we can implement on our farm so we can be more profitable and we can advance the industry and our individual goals in selection of the best herd moving forward. Anyway, so I'm gonna leave you guys, and remember, that this is farming with science.